Cipriani in town purchasing provisions. The 12th. Explain to Napoleon in the least offensive manner I could the message I had been ordered by Sir Hudson Lowe to deliver, with an assurance from the governor that his papers had been kept sacred, which I observed had been confirmed by a letter from Emmanuel de las Casas, which had accompanied those that had been returned, testifying that the papers had been respected. Sir Hudson Lowe had told me that during the examination of the papers, which took place always in presence of las Casas, whenever the latter had pointed out one as belonging to him, Napoleon, it was immediately put aside without being looked at, and that when the examination was finished, the papers were sealed up with las Casas' seal and not opened again unless in his presence. That Sir Hudson had said that so far from being instigated by malice or revenge, he had written to the ministry to ameliorate his condition. Napoleon replied that he did not believe it. No government 2,000 leagues off could know the localities so well as to give minute details. They could only give general orders that no assertion from a man who had told so many falsehoods could be credited, and that the letter from young las Casas was not satisfactory, as it merely contained an assurance from Sir Hudson Lowe that they would be respected. As to his instructions, continued he, I have no doubt that if he has not received written orders to blank, he has verbal ones, voce. When it is intended to blank, it is always commenced by cutting off all communication between him and the world, by enveloping him with mystery and secrecy, in order that after having accustomed the world to hear nothing about him, blank, tell him, added he, my sentiments on the subject. I then spoke about Sir Thomas Strange, and informed him that Sir Thomas Strange, who had been Chief Justice in the East Indies, was desirous of paying his respects to him, and that his intended visit did not arise from curiosity, was a mark of that attention which every person ought to show towards so great a man, and one who had filled so high a station in the world. Napoleon replied, I will see no person who does not go first through Bertrand. Persons sent directly by the governor I will not see, as it would have the appearance of obeying a command from him. Count Bertrand now came in and mentioned that the governor was at Longwood and wanted to see me. Napoleon then said, if he asks you any questions about my thoughts, tell him that I intend on writing a protest to the Prince Regent against his barbarous conduct, that his keeping las Casas in custody when there is nothing against him is illegal, that he ought either to be sent back here or sent off the island or tried, that if he wishes to accommodate differences, as he informed you, let him alter his conduct and put matters upon the footing they were during the time of Admiral Cockburn. As to the visit of the judge, whom he wishes me to see, tell him que les gens qui sont dans un tombeau ne recevront pas de visite. The inhabitants of the tomb receive no visits, as he literally immured me in a tomb. Besides, according to his restrictions, if the judge does not speak French, I cannot employ one of my officers to interpret, as he has prohibited strangers who may visit me from speaking or communicating with any person in my suite, and moreover, I have lost las Casas. Count Bertrand desired me to say that if he saw Sir Thomas Strange, he should be obliged to show him those parts of the governor's restrictions signed by himself in which he had prohibited those who had a pass to see the emperor from holding any communication with others of his household, unless specially permitted. Informed Sir Hudson Lowe of what had been desired, which he said he would communicate to Lord Bathurst. He then observed that Count las Casas had not followed General Bonaparte out of affection, but merely to have an opportunity of obtaining material from him to publish his life. That General Bonaparte did not know what las Casas had written, or the expressions which he had dropped, that he had already collected some very curious materials for his history. That ministers feared that some turbulent, intriguing persons in France or on the continent would endeavor to excite rebellion or new wars in Europe by making use of his Napoleon's name to ensure their purposes. The General Bonaparte was very lucky in having so good a man as himself to deal with. He added again that he could not tell the nature of his orders, that he had an important object to fulfill independent of the detention of General Bonaparte, and that after some more conversation upon similar subjects said that he would give permission tomorrow to Sir Thomas Strange and family to communicate with Bertrand or with any others of his suite. So Sir Thomas Reed, to whom I mentioned Napoleon's answer relative to the interview which the governor was desirous to obtain for Sir Thomas Strange, Sir Thomas replied, "If I were governor, I'll be D. if I would not make him feel that he was a prisoner." I observed, why you cannot do much more to him than you have already done, unless you put him in irons. "Oh," answered Reed, "if he did not comply with what I wanted, I'll be a D. If I wouldn't take his books from him, which I'll advise the governor to do. He is a D. outlaw and a prisoner, and a governor has a right to treat him with as much severity as he likes. And nobody has any business to interfere with him in the execution of his duty." Told Napoleon that His Excellency had directed me to communicate, he observed that the only way to prevent people from making use of his name in order to excite rebellion was to put him to death. That, said he, is the only effectual mode, and sooner the better. Il n'y a que les morts qui ne reviennent pas. The dead only return not. All that he says, continued he, is purgator la polvere, to throw dust, to deceive the judge in order that he may say when he arrives in England that it's my own fault if I do not receive whoever I please. Un uomo cattivo che ha tutta la scatrezza siciliana. A bad man who has all the villainy of a Sicilian. The 13th, a sealed letter from Napoleon to Las Casas given by Count Bertrand to Captain Poppleton for the purpose of being forwarded through the governor to the Count. At 6 p.m., a dragoon brought 2 letters from Sir Hudson Lowe to Count Bertrand, one returning Napoleon's letter to Count Las Casas because it was sealed, adding that he would not forward any sealed letter, and that even if it were open, it would depend upon the nature of the contents, whether it would be forwarded or not, as he, the governor, did not wish that any communication should take place between Longwood and Count Las Casas. In the other, the governor intimated that probably he should not take any steps with respect to Las Casas until he heard from the British government. Saw Napoleon, who observed that he believed nothing good could come from the governor, who was a man of bad lymph. He ought, continued he, to have several large blisters applied to draw away some of that bad lymph from him. He conversed upon the probability of a revolution in France. "Ere 20 years have elapsed, when I am dead and buried," said he, "you will witness another revolution in France. It is impossible that 29 millions of Frenchmen can live contented under the yoke of sovereigns imposed upon them by foreigners, and against whom they have fought and bled for nearly 30 years. Can you blame the French for not being willing to submit to the yoke of such animals as much in you? You are very fond in England of making comparison between the restoration of Charles II and of Louis, but there's not the smallest similitude. Charles was recalled by the mass of the English nation to the throne, which his successor afterwards lost for a mass. But as to the Bourbons, there is not a village in France which has not lost 30 or 40 of the flower of its youth in endeavoring to prevent their return. The sentiments of the nation are Ce ne sont pas nous qui ont ramené ces misérables, non ceux qui ont ravagé notre pays, qui ont brûlé nos maisons, qui ont violé nos femmes et nos filles, les ont mis sur les troncs par la force. All right. I asked him some questions about the share that Moreau had in George's conspiracy. Moreau said he confessed to his advocate that he had seen and conversed with George and Pichegru, and that on his trial he intended to avow it. His counsel, however, dissuaded him from doing so and observed that if he confessed having seen George, nothing could save him from condemnation to death. Moreau, in an interview he had with two other conspirators, insisted that the first step to be taken was to kill me. And when I was disposed of, he should have great power and influence with the army. But that as long as I lived, he could do nothing. When he was arrested, the paper of accusation against him was given to him, in which his crime was stated to be the having conspired against the life of the first consul and the security of the Republic in complicity with Pichegru and George. On reading the names of those two, he dropped the paper and fainted. In the battle before Dresden, said Napoleon, I ordered an attack to be made upon the Allies by both flanks of my army. While the maneuvers for this purpose were executing, the center remained motionless. At the distance of about from this to the outer gate, I observed a group of persons collected together on horseback, concluding that they were endeavoring to observe my maneuvers. I resolved to disturb them and called to a captain of artillery who commanded a field battery of 18 or 20 pieces. J'étais une dizaine de boulets à la fois dans ce groupe. Là, peut-être, il y a quelques petits généraux. Throw a dozen of bullets at once into that group. Perhaps there's some little generals in it. It was done instantly. One of the balls struck Moreau and carried off both his legs and went through his horse. Many more, I believe, who were near him were killed and wounded. A moment before Alexander had been speaking to him, Moreau's legs were amputated not far from the spot. One of his feet, with the boot upon it, which the surgeon had thrown upon the ground, was brought by a peasant to the king of Saxony, with information that some officer of great distinction had been struck by a cannon shot. The king, conceiving that the name of the person might perhaps be discovered by the boot, sent it to me. It was examined at my headquarters, but all that could be ascertained was that the boot was neither English nor French manufacture. The next day we were informed that it was the leg of Moreau. It is not a little extraordinary, continued Napoleon, that in an action a short time afterwards I ordered the same artillery officer with the same guns and under similar circumstances to throw 18 to 20 bullets at once into the concourse of officers collected together, by which General St. Priest, another Frenchman, a traitor and a man of talent, who had a command in the Russian army, was killed, along with many others. Nothing, continued the Emperor, is more destructive than a discharge of a dozen or more guns at once amongst a group of persons. From one or two they may escape, but from a number discharged at them it is almost impossible. After Essling, when I had caused my army to go over to the Isle of Lobau, there was for some weeks, by common and tacit consent on both sides between the soldiers, not by any agreement between the generals, a cessation of firing, which indeed had produced no benefit and only killed a few unfortunate sentinels. I rode every day in different directions. No person was molested on either side. One day, however, riding along with Oudinot, I stopped for a moment upon the edge of the island, which was about 80 toises distant from the opposite bank where the enemy was. They perceived us, and knowing me by the little hat and the great coat, they pointed a 3-pounder at us. The ball passed between Oudinot and me and was very close to both of us. We put spurs to our horses and speedily got out of sight. Under the actual circumstances, the attack was little better than murder, but if they had fired a dozen guns at us, they must have killed us. Count Bertrand brought back Napoleon's letter to Captain Poppleton, broke the seal before him, and desired that it might be sent in that state to Sir Hudson Lowe. Some oranges sent to Longwood by the Admiral. 14th. Napoleon, very unwell, had passed a very bad night. Found him in his bed at 11 p.m. Doctor said I had a nervous attack last night, which kept me continually uneasy and restless with a severe headache and involuntary agitations. I was without sense for a few moments. I barely thought and hoped that a more violent attack would have taken place, which would have carried me off before morning. I seemed as if a fit of apoplexy was coming on. I felt a heaviness and giddiness in my head as if it were overloaded with blood, with desire to put myself in an upright posture. I felt a heat in my head and called to those about me to pour some cold water over it, which they did not comprehend for some time. Afterwards, the water felt hot, and I thought it smelt of sulfur, though in reality it was cold. At this time, he was in a free perspiration, which I recommended him to encourage, and his headache was much diminished after I had recommended everything I thought necessary or advisable. He replied, "Si vivere bi troppo lungo." He afterwards spoke about funeral rites and added that when he died, he would wish that his body might be burned. "It's the best mode," said he, "as then the corpse does not produce any inconvenience. And as to the resurrection, that must be accomplished by a miracle, and it is easy to the being who has it in his power to perform such a miracle as bringing the remains of bodies together, also to form again the ashes of the dead.